I met Andy and Jez in the last year at Wilmslow Comprehensive in Cheshire. I guess the common threads back then were like Hendrix and sort of like Velvets and sort of 60s music really. I mean, they were like into New Order and the Smiths.
He had his own band on the go and we had our own band at the time, which I'm not going to tell you the names of at the moment.
We were in a band, terrible band name, Open View. That was actually previously known as Static Mist. And he was in a band called The Risk, yeah. Much better name.
They had this band, you know, with an awful name, Static Mist, you know, but says me in a band called The Risk, you know.
But I reckon we had better musical taste.
I remember just being dead impressed with them too because they were like, I was like serious about being a musician, but you know, the cliche about like being in a band with your mate who can just about play one note on the bass, but you know, because he's your mate, he's in, if you like, your band being you and him. And Andy and Jez impressed me, you know, by them, how seriously they took it.
We all left school really when we were about 16.
And then we met a couple of years later in a nightclub called the Hacienda.
Like I say, I didn't see them for years, bumped into them in the Hacienda, wrecked and going, wow, you know, excited, what are you doing here, man?
I don't remember actually having a chat, but we decided to try and have a go at doing something which involved sort of underground dance music, really.
And that's how we really started. We just had to learn how to use the gear because we were just used to plugging in guitars and playing drums, so that was a bit of a learning curve.
In the time I hadn't seen them, they got Space Face together. And that was like, I was like, wow, this is, well, there's the A side, obviously, you know, it's fucking great.
It was very much, this is what I want to hear when I go out, you know.
Next obvious step was to try and get it played in the clubs. We kind of basically had no interest off record companies after we sent the kind of demo tapes.
So the only way we're going to get this out is if we borrow the money really and stick it out.
You know, their mum lent them plenty of money. 600 quid later, we were in London at Porky's pressing plant, mastering this record.
First 500 sold really quickly, then we pressed up another 1,000 and another 1,000.
Just distributing them ourselves in the back of a car. We were driving around the country taking, 20 to that shop, 20 to that.
Yeah, it's the usual story, send demo tapes, rejection letters every week, and then you decide to do it yourself, and then suddenly all the record companies want to sign you.
We got our first deal, we got about $7 for Space Face off Virgin 10 Records. Obviously we bought ourselves some kit, we paid their mum, just for putting up with us for like 7 months,
My God.
We were 22, we'd made a record in our bedroom and, we were hearing it, midnight in a club. There was not much really to touch that.
Then we got dropped after that.
A big spur really for all three of us getting a record made was getting in on the guest list at the Haas. And funnily enough, the guy who eventually signed us up was Rob Gretton, who was sort of founder of Hacienda. We didn't even really sign to Rob, it was very much just an agreement, I'll put you make the tunes, I'll put them out. Dealing with Rob was very much back to basics, independent kind of spirit. Not say, here, oh, you guys are the best, you are, it was just very much, if I like your tunes, I'll put them out. And, at the time with us, it was like, fair enough. We worked with him for like about 7 or 8 years. Golden ears, golden ears. That's what I used to always say. Ain't No Love was a real accident how it happened.
Let's give him some Give me the one, give me the one, give me the one thing I'm asking for.
It was literally one afternoon, me and Jez was just going through some records, looking for something, to kick, start something off. And I found this record that I won at a fair when I was 11. I'd never played it, in whatever the years, because it looked crap, We found that sample and it was like, it's not bad, this.
Get it all out. Tell me what you want from me.
It was literally, you know, let's do a tune which we can all hear, you know, Hacienda, you know, Friday night at midnight. So when it took off and went to number 3, it was a real surprise to all of us.
Don't wanna stay at home. Why can't you be good?
You know, I think all of us will always be really thankful, Ain't No Love, because what it did, it bought us time. You know, it bought us a studio, and without Ain't No Love, there's certainly, I don't think there would have been a Doves. Because there was no plan when we made Ain't No Love, there wasn't like, here's a single off an album. It was very much, like I said, you know, let's write a song, you know, for the dance floor. There was nothing to back it up. The only one record that I feel all of us have really felt we've never done justice on is the song we did after Ain't No Love called Respect, because it was just us panicking and making a record that we thought other people wanted to hear. I mean, in some ways, it's looking back, it's a very good thing, because ever since we've only ever made records that we want to make and that we want to hear.
Right, we're in Ancoats now. My grandma used to live in there years ago, Victorian dwellings. Mum and Dad were born around here. That's church straight ahead. It's St Michael's Church. I used to go there as a kid. And it's weird coming back here years later to have a studio in this place. We did Coasting here, we did Past. We did that whole EP here. Various tracks for Full Fathom 5, the first sub album. For 2 years, we were never out of this building, you know. It was shady at night, shady in the day. This is the one that got burnt down. I got home to a message of Andy and Jez saying, ring me, I'm awake. You know, it's like 5 in the morning, fuck, what's happened here? I rang Andy up and he's like, me and Jez have just been down at the studio, we got a phone call off the old bill. The studio's burnt down. You know, they'd arrived and they saw one fireman going through Rofi's records. One fireman playing the blues on my acoustic, according to Andy and Jez. I'd love to have seen it, but I can imagine it. And one fucking doing his name in like a spray paint, you know, it's just like, cheers lads, you know, our life's just gone tits up here, and like, but you know, that's firemen for you, they deal with that shit every day. No one said, well, that's it, I suppose, isn't it? You know, see you later. It was never ever mentioned, let's just call it a day, you know. The Delta Tapes album was all the stuff that got lost in the fire. I mean, we made DATs of our demos, you know.
We just had this one DAT, really. That's all we had to show for the last kind of like 5 years worth of work.
And then offer came in via our manager, Dave. Did we want to put out all this stuff we've been doing? And we were like, well, we don't want to put it out in England because it's going to jeopardise what our future stuff. We didn't even know what our future stuff was going to be. We sort of decided, right, okay, Dave, we'll do it, only if it doesn't come out in England. So we put it out in Australia and Portugal, of all places.
A lot of the Delta Tapes is like the missing link, if you like, between kind of Sub and Doves. It was this kind of intermediate period where we kind of were moving we were moving away from the sort of dance floor and kind of experimenting with new kind of sounds, really.
The Delta Tapes was almost like putting an end, like I said, putting a full stop to the fire and to that period of Sub, you know.
The collaborations basically just happened just by sheer chance, you know. We were kind of messing about with new kind of sonics, and a mate of a mate brought down Tricky, you know, and he just wandered into the studio and we're like, all right, Tricky, hello. And about 2 hours later, he was singing on one of our tracks. And then Burning Sumner, we kind of wrote this tune and thought, oh, Jimmy knows Bernard, he's done a bit of BVs and electronic. Yeah, I'll see if he wants to have a go at that. At the time, me and Andy wanted to change the name from Sub into Doves, but Jimmy convinced us to keep the name Sub for at least the last recordings.
We felt we'd done 2 great 12-inch tracks there, but like no one really had paid a blind bit of notice. It got the, you know, jockey slot attention, and it got a few plays in London and da, but it didn't really do out. So that was it. We really, I think then the penny dropped. Certainly for Andy and Jez, this Sub name's got to go. You know, I was like doggedly going, no man, let's show them.
Jimmy was quite keen to keep Sub just because he wanted to say, no, fuck you, we can change and we can do what we want here. I think just with all the troubles, you know, that we'd had, we wanted a new start, you know, we wanted a real defining cut-off from using guest vocalists, you know, and we very much wanted art just to, like, as we've always wanted, a self-contained unit.
But it was like even I eventually went, okay, maybe it's time to move on.
That's when the beginning of Lost Souls started to happen.
We just can't go wrong.